Our next speaker, I think most of you know, is Karina Kim. She has a master's degree in social work from the University of Pennsylvania and a PhD in social welfare from the School of Social Welfare at Stony Brook University. She's taught a wide range of subjects in addition to working as a psychotherapist, public health administrator, and advocate. Karina has done volunteer work helping both seniors and juveniles and people in between. If all of her accomplishments aren't enough, you can also go to her to have your dog or cat groomed, because she's certified in dog and cat grooming.
Thank you. It's always good to have humor in life.
Thank you. Life is hard as it is. I think we need to laugh sometimes, right? So I laugh all the time, and I deal with very serious issues, so I have to laugh. And I deal with a lot of children and parents and serious issues like suicide, prevention of suicide. So I've always realized that if I don't have a sense of humor, I'm not going to survive. I'm just going to go to Hawaii and groom cats and dogs my whole life. Because I know some people go there to retire. So I wanted to definitely tell you that I am not an expert on caregiving, but the reason why I became familiar with caregiving in the Korean community.
Speaker close.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The reason why I'm not an expert in caregiving, but the reason why I got familiar with caregiving in the Korean community is because I not only volunteered with the Korean communities ever since, since I was 10 or 11. I also had a grandmother. My father's mother had Parkinson's since I was a teenager, and so I kind of partially took care of her with a home health aide. She wasn't always there, but I was exposed since I was in high school. Right now, and also my father died of diabetes, and he had a lot of complications with that. And I moved back to New York because I wanted to be closer to him because, he was suffering a lot. Right now, I'm taking care of my mother who has 2 broken legs. So do you see why I need humor? So my mom lives with me in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in Queens, and I moved from New Jersey to do so. It's been 6 months of struggling, but lots of love and learning how to cook very bad Korean food. So I said, so how was it? Because Korean people are not really very familiar with saying thank you all the time, or oh, 맛있다, or tastes good. So I have to ask her because I'm Americanized and I need to have communication to feel good about all the hard work I did for horrible food. She'll be like, it's like, oh my. So I'm thinking, 6 years of this. 6 years, I feel like it's 6 years, it's a Freudian slip. So it's been 6 months, but anyway. But I also came into caregiving issues because I did my dissertation on Korean males, the firstborn and only son, but really, I studied the females as well as the males because I also interviewed the sisters because I didn't want to leave the women out because the women definitely have a big role in caregiving, obviously. But when I interviewed for about a total of, I would say, about 130 Korean males and Chinese. I compared it with Chinese, Korean males, females, and Chinese, so half and half. I found people all over the Northeast, some people who came from California, and almost every single Korean male or male told me in the interviews that they had to be the ones to take care of their elderly parents if they were the only son or the oldest son. So the Changnam had a big role in the expectations of what they had to do once their parents got older and couldn't take care of themselves as well as they used to. So I kept hearing the same theme, and I didn't realize that my friends in high school and junior high school, grammar school, were feeling that not always overt, clear messages, you have to take care of me when I get older, but it was always an understated, an understood, but sometimes overstated statement that the sons had that burden. But the other part of that was they didn't think of it as a burden. But the side issue of that was they had the expectations and they were treated really well as children. But as older adults, it didn't always turn out that the sons or the only sons, the firstborn sons or only sons, took care of their elderly parents. It ended up being more of the sisters, or possibly nursing homes, or the parents try to take care of themselves as much as possible to not burden the children. So there's a lot of interesting reality issues of what they were treated like, how they were treated by parents within their role of what they expected. So 부모님들이 요구하는 건 이렇게 높았어요. for the 장남. But so the parents who are having, parents had such high expectations of the firstborn or only sons, but then as time went on, it seemed like it wasn't just the only sons who took on that burden and role and privilege. So I felt like there were so many psychological issues, and I gave a lot of credit to the firstborn or only sons growing up, because I went to Stuyvesant High School and 50% of the students were Asian, and of that, like half of them must have been Korean, it felt like. And so because of that, I knew so many guys who were like the leaders in their families. They would even buy flowers for their mother because their fathers were so busy working, and their fathers weren't, trained in the American way. You gotta get flowers for Valentine's Day and things like that. And the sons had a big role. I was surprised, and they were helping with the family store if they had a business. I mean, they did a lot, so I had to give them a lot of credit. But then the girls, they were doing all the housework, the dishes, the helping with the cleaning. They were also helping with the store, but there were definitely different things that I found, and I'm gonna show you that first. But before I show you some of that stuff, I wanted to show you Bobby Lee from Mad TV. Anybody know Bobby Lee from Mad TV? He's a Korean actor. Sorry, I don't want to show you violence. Let me start from where I really want to show it to you.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, Nicole, how was your summer?
Oh, it was great, Bobby. Thanks for asking. It's actually kind of cool. I opened a show on Broadway with Martin Short called Fame Becomes Me.
Okay, this is what I just heard. So.
Okay, well, that's not anywhere near what I just said, so you might not have been paying attention. But did you do something better than that this summer?
A little better. I was the star of a soap opera. Big deal.
Oh, wow, really?
Yep.
Oh, which Bold and the Beautiful? Or Young and the Restless?
Nope.
No, Days of Our Lives.
No, it's called Attitudes and Feelings, both desirable and sometimes secretive.
Okay, I've never heard of that one.
It's huge in Korea, and if you work at a nail salon or a liquor store, you'd see it.
I think you're making it up.
All right, well then, just take a look. 조군, 캔파파이어, 나래서, 조군.
안녕하세요, 닥터분. 즐거운 캠파이어 축하합니다.
내가 지금 한국말 못해요.
제가 분기점 의사한테 고백할 일이 있습니다.
내가 지금 너무 배불러요.
제가 사랑한다고요.
내가 미안해.
Okay, well, I just had to show you this. There are little segments I wanted to show you this, but the reason why I showed this is because it's about how when he speaks in Korean, I think enough of you noticed that he wasn't really saying the same thing that was written on the captions. So it's making fun of Koreans not really being forthcoming and honest about communication, about how they really feel, because maybe they don't want to burden people, they don't want to make a big scene, and they just don't want to put it all out there. So this is something that definitely impacts whether it's caregiving issues or psychology of Korean Americans, but I think it's really funny to see it this way. But there's another part of this I wanted to show you. Let me get to that part. Now it's just about PTSD. He lost his girlfriend, and then he's reenacting the same image. He needs some therapy for trauma, the poor thing. She died. I mean, he thought she died after the kiss.
대통령한테 인사하라.
내내 대통령 진수유케 경조 남마인
너네 사랑은 당신 오지에 왜 왔냐?
어?
내 사랑 주고 계잖아. 나한테 나 사랑한다고 얘기했다. 근데 이제 왜 안 믿었다? 사랑을 못하게 당신 답을 썼냐? 이 사랑을 가는 정도 그 여자 되게 좋아하는 중인지 근데 너 여자 닮았다는 거 아니다 먼저 시작했다는 여자 좋아 내 사랑하는 여자는 너 때문에 죽었냐
And I wanted to show you this part because Korean society, Korean culture has so much of this Confucianism of respecting those who are presidents or older persons. So there is that level of respect that is expected within the culture. So then tying that to caregiving, they're really, the older parents expect their children as part of society and culture and history that because they did everything when the children were younger, that as you become older, the children will take care of you, right? So that's the expectation. But this is just showing how much respecting and bowing and all these titles and everything. I think it's kind of funny. Okay, and then let me get to this part.
왜 울어요?
왜? 마음이 아파요.
And Koreans drink a lot of alcohol when they're depressed.
웨이터!
너 살았어요?
런던 왜?
We will stop with the silliness now. Okay, so do you identify with these clips with Korean culture? Does that make sense? I think this is really funny, so I had to show you because it's really fun. I wanted to tell you that as I get through the slides, let me see here. Is this F? Do you remember if it's F5 to make them bigger? I don't remember.
You can double click.
Oh, I'm trying, but yeah, I am double clicking, but it's not opening up big.
tab for slideshow.
Okay, let me see.
To the right. Not that far.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna get started because we already spoke enough. I don't want to take up all the time. But I'm just wondering, with a show of hands, how many people do you, if in your families, how many people in your families, if you have a sister or a brother, how many of those caregivers are women? Can people raise their hands? Who is the caregiver, who was the caregiver or is the caregiver for your older parents? Whether they're in the US or Korea, how many of you have siblings who are female who are caregivers? Can you raise your hand? So females, only like 5, 6, 7, maybe like 7. Okay, how about males? Who are the male caregivers of their older parents? Okay, I only see one. Well, I'm wondering because I want to know what the reality is, because the reality is always more interesting versus the data, because the expectations might not be there, but we don't know what really happens. Leslie already explained that I have different experiences, but I worked at Flushing Hospital outpatient mental health clinic while I was doing my PhD for 7 years, and I worked also with Korean patients there. And there was a lot of this, what I just showed you with Bobby Lee, the video clips of not really speaking a lot. So there was a lot of really repressed feelings, a lot of frustrating, difficult situations. And I experienced a lot of them needing to take Prilosec, a lot of the GI medications because they had a lot of stomach upset and acid reflux. So a lot of the mental health Korean patients had psychosomatic symptoms because of mental health issues and stress. In America, right at around now, it's 1.4 million Korean Americans, and as of 2010, 140,000 were Korean seniors in America. Okay, and about 20% of the seniors of elders are supported by families. So we wonder where the rest of them are, right? Usually people try to stay within their own homes, and that's really what happens, right? That people try to take care of themselves. Nobody wants to be a burden. These days, it's also in Korea, because of the economy as well as in the US, it's becoming more difficult for children to take care of older parents if they don't have good financial income. So that's been another reason why that it's hard to take an older parent, and when you have your own children, your own financial difficulties, your house, you have to pay your mortgage, and your children have to get karate lessons, tutoring, everything else, piano lessons. In 2010, the census only shows 2,281 Koreans in nursing homes in the US. So language is a problem for seniors, because if 60% of people who are not seniors in the US are not proficient in English, can you imagine the seniors, at their age, because it was hard for them to come here anyway and then to adapt and learn English. And 60% might be a little bit high, it might be even higher, because I've done a lot of research with Korean Americans who were younger, and they told me that I found 90% of the parents were not proficient in English, who were in America for at least 10, 20, 30 years. And also about social programs like the benefits and food stamps, it's hard for them to navigate. It's hard for anybody to navigate, and then when you have a language barrier, it's even more difficult. So in Korea, I just wanted to set a little bit of a picture. In Korea, 50% of Koreans in Korea are living in poverty. So the attitudes have changed. In 2000, 90% of children believe they should care for their parents. This is a government poll. But in 2014, only 37% of the children believe that they should take care of their elderly parents. I don't know if anybody knows Sodaemun. Do they know Sodaemun? So they said there's about 9,000 older persons living alone in an area, and they have about 30 calls a day for suicide issues. The staff the calls. And even the new president, the female president, she started this initiative. I'm not sure if it really panned out because that's what they were hoping for. But they're giving, for the 70% of the poorest Korean elders, they're getting some money. It might not be a lot, but even 200 could be helpful.
What's the income definition of poverty?
Oh, well, in America, I think it's under 20,000 a year. In Korea, it's hard to know because it's very subjective. I mean, rent in Korea is probably just as high as New York City, and you have to pay up front at least a year, right? Is that true? I mean, a lot of places, they want 1 full years of rent up front, and it's a whole financial issue in Korea. And because the economy is not doing so well, and people are really working hard, but they're not getting the pay that they work for. So to take care of
there's
the
no
person.
cutoff?
I don't know the
There's
cutoff
no
in
government
Korea.
cutoff?
Oh, you're talking about benefits or subsidies or
In
help?
Korea.
They have not had regular systematic supplemental income in Korea, so they're just starting to have that conversation. Is that true? I'm sure more of you know more about this than I do, but that's what I have understood over the years because I've been following it. So for this president to initiate this kind of initiative with having supplemental income I think it's a big deal. I've never heard of it. So, okay. So suicide in Korea for 65 years and older, it's jumped almost 4 times in 2010. So obviously everybody knows about Confucianism, so I don't need to go through this, but that was really why I wanted to show you the Babili, because there's so much of the respect for older persons ingrained in Korean society. And every East Asian professor I've talked to at Stony Brook, because I spoke to a lot of them while I was doing my dissertations. I wanted to know, what am I looking at? Is this true? How about Chinese studies? And they said, of all the East Asian countries, Korea was the closest follower of Confucianism. That Koreans have really stuck to it and never let it go. But it looks like they're letting it go a little bit more these days, correct? As far as we know about the trends of attitudes and beliefs. Korean parents, so this is an editorial that Joseon Ilbo had. They said it's a ludicrous custom where parents sell their future to support their children. So I see so many parents, Korean parents in America, sacrifice so much, they barely take vacation. And I'm talking about people who make maybe like working class, middle class income. If Koreans are at a higher echelon of income security, then it's not as difficult because maybe they already have 401ks building up. But for a lot of Koreans, especially the ones I grew up with in New York City, they don't have the 401ks. They don't have health insurance, so because of that, it's a big sacrifice. So I actually grew up with because I grew up with a lot of Korean people, I had a lot of female friends whose fathers passed away at age 60 of a heart attack, high blood pressure. It was very common, and I just almost felt like, is this predetermined? How does it happen like that? Well. As I became more interested in learning at the research level and finding out and clinical level, it's that they just didn't get a break, and also being the father, having to be the breadwinner, and they just worked so hard, they just didn't get a chance to rest and take care of themselves. And because they didn't have health insurance, they didn't do the preventive medication, medicine, so they weren't taken care of, before it got too bad. So the expectation was, our children, Korean American older parents, were thinking their children were going to be this old age insurance, right? And that was what I found in the dissertations also, because the dissertation research also, because every single firstborn or only son said that I'm going to take care of my parents when they're older. They don't have a retirement savings. They don't have any savings because a lot of the Koreans I interviewed, not all of them, but a lot of them went to really good schools. They went to Penn, they went to Harvard, they went to Yale, they went to Princeton, and then the other ones went to Stony Brook, because I had a Stony Brook sample as well, and then I had other people, different schools, but they knew how much their parents sacrificed. So all that money didn't go into retirement. So now the Koreans in Korea are thinking, that's crazy, save your money, don't go crazy, spending it all on your kids when you need to have it for your future, because who's gonna take care of you? Okay, so this is just from my dissertation research, and I'm going to end with that. So don't worry, we're almost done, because I know I've taken a lot of time. So these are some of the themes that kept coming over and over. The Changnams, the firstborn or only sons, usually had more time from their parents, more attention, they felt more feelings of love by their parents and relatives. Like every time the relatives would come over, they get all the attention. Oh, so what are you gonna do today, Paul? Or what are you gonna do in the future? Are you gonna become a doctor or a lawyer? So they would really talk to them and give them a lot of praise, but the girls would not get as much attention. And the sons would get more money, more material gifts, and sometimes faster and better food. I remember this interviewee said that this sister said, yeah, my brother asked for bulgogi for that meat, and then like Korean stir-fry meat, and then I asked for like japchae or something like a noodle dish, and my mom gave my brother his dish first, so I had to wait for my favorite dish because he was priority. And so the chesa, the burial ritual in Korean culture, the firstborn only sons always had to be part of that, so they had to be present. You know, some people do chesa like every year, responsibly for younger or female siblings. So they would say things like, you have to bring all your you have to bring Poland Spring water bottles for your sister because she's in college, you have to take care of her, and she would be only 1 year younger, and the sons would have to do all this protection, caregiving, and so the sons, a lot of these college students were really resenting that role because they're thinking, I want to have fun, why am I taking care of my younger sister? That's not what I should be doing, not her parent, but a lot of them ended up being that way. But some of them like that role. Being a role model for siblings and sisters and cousins, especially if they're oldest. So if the males succeeded and went to a good school, good career, that this was one of the highlights of, you know, their success was really highlighted in the family. So it was important that they do that. They were also the peacemaker, mediator, family facilitator. So when a family had a fight with another relative, like, you know, imas, uncles, they would have fights. They would have the son be in the middle and mediate and call and say, okay, let's get together, you know what I mean? And they were young still. Even the junior high school kids sometimes would be given that role, which is great for leadership skills, so it's not always bad. Taking care of parents when they're older and need financial and other assistance. I knew an interviewee who worked at the family store business for at least 10 years of his life, and he never got married. And they moved to South America, and he didn't finish his college education, and all the other brothers who were younger did everything else. They got homes, they got wives, they had children, and so the oldest son was stuck in that role, and they sacrificed a lot. Also, the Korean males versus Korean females were always expected to marry a Korean girl, especially because of the language issues, and they were expected to, you know, bring down the family name, so it was always with the family name. I kept hearing that so many times. And the girls, it didn't matter, as long as you find someone who's going to take care of you. Some felt their role was suffocating and that it wasn't fair to take care of younger siblings because their age difference wasn't big. Many felt that they were stressed due to their burden of their roles. And they would sometimes get GI issues, headaches, obsessive-compulsive issues because they had to be perfect. I never felt good enough. I interviewed a lot of guys who went to law school in their 30s, and they were in medical, like they wanted to do medical school. So after they finished their master's degree in business, they wanted to go back to medical school because they didn't think it was good enough. So, and a guy from Penn who was very depressed, the father was a doctor, but he finished med school, he was also part of the study, and the father said, why couldn't you make it to Princeton or Harvard? I don't understand what happened to you. So he thought going to Penn was a real disappointment, and ever since then, he's been depressed his whole life. Actually, he also didn't go to top grammar school starting first grade. He didn't test into a really good grammar school in first grade, and ever since then, the parents have said, you can't be a failure, you have to get into that school. So it started really young, and no wonder he was on antidepressants for the rest of his life. He's like maybe, by now he should be 40-something. Now he's doing business-related MD stuff. So he has an MD, didn't do residency or anything like that, but he still felt like a failure. I almost kind of did therapy with him because he was so depressed. Anyway, so this here, and probably one or two more slides. Firstborn only sons, other things were they wish they had a role model. So I asked them at the end of the interview, I said, what do you think would help you in your role of being the firstborn or only son? And they said, I wish, are you gonna have a group of other 장남s, other males, firstborn only sons? Because I wanna know if my experience is the same, because it's the first time that anyone's ever asked them about their role and paid attention to the stress and burden that they had, expectation-wise. And they wanted a group of people to really help them feel like, I'm not alone. There are older people who've been through this, and they can guide me. Many wish their parents spent more time with them, and this is definitely a theme with immigrant families as well. But in Korean culture, because everything is 24/7, especially in New York City, you barely see your parents, especially your father. Many parents feel they work too hard and work too many hours, and many interviewees, they wanted a relationship with their parents, basically, and felt they were too hard on them to excel in school. So for the children who are maybe not like Harvard-level students, but their parents still wanted them to go to Harvard, so it was very hard for them to bridge that gap, and it felt very stressful for them. Every single interview versus the Chinese interviews, they would say, okay, so what is it that your parents expect of you? And I kept a very open-ended question. I didn't use any specific targeted questions or leading questions. And I said, so what do your parents expect? Every single Korean person, male, said, I have to be a doctor or lawyer. The Chinese interviewees, the males, they would say, my parents want me to have a girlfriend, they want me to be happy, they want me to go to a accredited 4-year college program, and they just want me to buy a house, and then they'll be happy for me. So not every Chinese parent, but a lot of the interviews that I interviewed with who were Chinese American, none of them, except for Taiwanese, said I have to be a doctor or a lawyer. So it's very interesting. Some siblings, firstborn or only sons, were jealous, so for the rest of their lives, they've had conflict with their siblings. If the son was treated better than the daughter, then they had conflict within themselves, so they didn't get along. So I remember one of the interviewees said that they're in their 30s, and then they wouldn't even go on a family trip together to Hawaii because he hated, the sister hated him so much because he got all the attention growing up, so it's just never been the same. Okay, so I don't want to go on. I have so much data, it'll take forever. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
Yes. You sound like you're assuming that the Koreans have families, sons, daughters, parents. Have you had some of the data on the people, immigrants who do not have any families, or just singles and have poverty? And have you had some interview or some research done?
For only sons? Only children,
children
who live in poverty?
No children, parents coming here just by themselves as immigrants. And have you had working with the Asian, the Chinese, the Japanese, there are a lot of them, there's, do not have children. Your theme is family here, But those who do not have families, what data do you have any data?
In terms of caregiving?
Yeah.
I think the census only has how, if you're 65 and older, who lives in a household, who lives in a rented household, who lives in a owner, somebody else owns a house and you live there. But I'm not sure exactly. I'm not, if you can clarify your question. What happens to them, you're saying?
People living in a senior housing.
Oh, okay, so you're saying people who are just alone?
SSI, they are living in SSI.
By themselves, no wife? No wife, no husband, or something like that? Well, actually, there are trends, and there were some articles in the Korean newspapers and American ones, about how Koreans who are all by themselves are going back to Korea because they have nowhere else to go and no one else to take care of them. They might not even have family back there, but they might feel like it's more comfortable, or they might have friends they had when they were younger, but no one's still not going to take care of them, but they felt more comfortable because they had nothing else to do in America. And so that's to me, that's a big high risk for suicide as well. I will say on the other side of that, I spoke with Scott Yoon. He is a clinical social worker at Bergen Regional Hospital, where they have a Korean nursing home unit, and I'm sure some people know about it. It's all Korean, and they have all Korean food, so it's in Bergen County, as you know. And he said that when the women, the wives go into the nursing home, the men visit more frequently, the husbands, because the husbands don't have as much support. They don't have as many friends, and they're devoted to their wives because that's all they have. That's their support system. But the women, when the husbands are in the hospital, in the nursing home, the women don't visit as often as the men, so it looks like women are bad, right? I'm just saying, the women don't, because they're still busy with the grandchildren, with the families, with their other children who need help and support. So the men are not gonna be the same way busy, but the women are really like, you know, okay, their husband's in there, they can't be there every day because they're needed everywhere else as well. So interesting things of gender dynamics. But yeah, it's hard to be alone for sure. I mean, that's why people have children, so that they can have at least some support. Any other thoughts or questions?
I mean, one thing I realize is that I grew up in a Korean household, not realizing that, but more of an observation that it seems that what happens with a lot of, I mean, in my family and with a lot of the Koreans I know, is that there's different sets of values, and that came out in the beginning of what you were saying, that when people come from another country or another culture, that they're bringing certain expectations and values that they put on their children. And I experienced the same thing about education and what was expected, and you have to be a doctor or a lawyer, and how, you know, you're considered a failure if you're not, and so on. And then when you have children in this country, they become very Americanized very quickly. And so what you were saying about, you know, in showing the clip, is that sometimes parents are feeling or experiencing certain things, and that when the children become Americanized, they don't really understand, but the lack of understanding often goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that the parents don't understand, why are my children doing this, and the children are thinking, why are my parents doing this?
Right.
So maybe I'm wondering if you have some advice as to how to open up that discussion so that the communication really can be clearer as to what each of them means when they say certain things.
Yeah, well, that was a big problem. When I was at Flushing Hospital outpatient clinic, a lot of the parents would tell me, I had a couple whose daughter killed herself of suicide, and they blamed each other. Of course, it's horrible for any couple, but they were like, well, you were too busy, or you were so harsh on her and everything. But there is no dialogue. The families did not have like a open communication with each other, especially when the children were young, because the parents were so busy working to pay the bills and trying to acclimate to being here as immigrants, that they lost the whole window of opportunity. So a lot of the parents, when their children went to college, the children would come back and the mothers or fathers would try to hug their children. And the parents were like, okay, in Korea we do this now. And the children were like, why are you hugging me? Because they never had it before. So it was really strange. So it wasn't something that they were used to. And so the lines of communication just weren't there before. It was just, I expect you to do well in school, get to a good college. But they didn't add to that, I love you just for who you are. And I think that's part of what the dialogue has to be, because a lot of the students, I did a lot, I worked for almost a decade while I was doing all my PhD stuff, I worked at Stony Brook University Counseling Center. So all the students, the Korean students and other Asian Chinese would say, my parents worked hard, but we never talk. And not only that, they had a language barrier because the parents weren't speaking English and the children were not speaking Korean because they didn't learn it because their parents were too busy to teach them. And Korean school was kind of like they said it was a joke. They barely went, they didn't understand. So the language barrier, the communication, the heart communication wasn't there. So a lot of recommendation of parents really sitting down with their kids and having quality time to talk. That's what the best thing that people were hoped to do. Thank you. Okay, if I'm done, I guess guess we'll get the next person to come. Thank you, everyone.